Welcome back to the Wealth and Purpose podcast, where we help families thrive by connecting wealth and purpose. I'm your host, Brady Fineske, president of TFO Wealth Partners, and we're thrilled to have you with us today. We all don't have to pay the same tuition. Today's show is about hearing stories and sharing experiences from other successful families that have led with purpose when crafting their plan. These stories will help us all better understand exactly what this show is designed to do, help us all connect wealth with purpose. I'm excited to welcome Chris Erblich, our partner at TFO and a partner of a national law firm, Husch Blackwell. Chris works with and speaks with high net worth families around the country and has successfully guided them through life's biggest challenges for over 30 years. As a result, his inspiring stories are both educational and motivational. They will help us all see a little bit of our situations in these real life experiences. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much. Thrilled to be here.
Right off the plane from Phoenix in studio, which is exciting. We've got fresh coffee and things are ready to go. It's early for you. And I'm excited about today's show because we get to share with the audience some of the stories that I've gotten to hear over the years from you. And I think to kind of lay the groundwork for that, I think about how your firm and the law firm can spend years and months drafting the perfect estate plan, right? Every word, every detail that's needed. And as a result, we can kind of easily solve one problem, the estate tax, the 40% problem. But oftentimes, as good as that plan is, it doesn't solve the bigger problem, what we reference as the 90% problem. And I thought, we could maybe lay the groundwork for these three stories that we want to share today, talking about this 90% problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. So it's funny how folks, when they initially meet with us, what they want to talk about is this 40% estate tax. And oh my gosh, what do we do to avoid that? How can we avoid that? How can we minimize that? How can we eliminate that? To be honest with you, that actually isn't very difficult, right? The tactics and techniques to do that, like if your lawyer or planner can't help you do that, you should fire them and get someone else. It isn't that hard. What is difficult, what is challenging though, is 90% of families, 90% will go shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves within 3 generations, broke to broke. Now think about that. People want to talk about the 40% estate tax. That isn't the issue.
Right.
90% of them will go shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves within 3 generations. That is the problem. It's not the estate tax. That we can solve. How do we help these families literally connect wealth and purpose?
Yeah, well, and so, I think the 10% must do something well, right? And the 10%, I think as we've experienced over the years in business and helping families kind of really do a deep dive and discover, those things that matter most to them, like what's the wealth for, which will be our first story, but also they capture it, they share it, they communicate it, and that allows at least those values to be transferred to these generations they never meet. And I think that's where I want to start today with the stories, because they're 3 of my favorite stories. And one of them in particular, the first one, we call the banana peel. But it's important because it really is a story that captures this notion of understanding what it's all for, what the wealth is for. So let's start with that one.
You bet. So as you mentioned, among other things, I'm an estate planning lawyer, and I was interviewed by a billionaire family in the South to work on their estate plan. They interviewed a bunch of lawyers. They said, what would you do? And I said, well, you do this, that, and the other. And they said, great. They hired us. And so we did their estate plan. So we're finished. And the gentleman says to me, so are we done? And I said, no. He said, what do you mean? And I said, we need to have a family meeting. You need to tell your family what the wealth is for, the purpose of the wealth. And he said, no. I'm asking, were the trusts funded, were the partnerships funded, was all of that done? Well, so yes, all of that was done. We're finished with that. But the truth is it won't work.
Yeah.
It won't work until you have a family meeting and you tell them what the purpose of the wealth is, what the wealth is for. Because if you don't tell them that purpose, what all of this is for, well, they will fill in the blank. And he says to me, boy, I spent a lot of money with you for you to tell me it's not going to work. I said, well, but here's the thing. You really do need to do that. You have to tell them that answer to an incredibly simple question. What is the wealth for? So he blows me off, and, I'm decent at harassing people. So, I emailed them, I texted them, I called them over the months. Finally, it was on a Thursday. He calls me up and he says, hey, want to have that family meeting. Want to have it on Sunday. Would you fly to town? I said, sure. So I fly to town on Sunday and I go up to his office and he goes to his desk and he pulls out an index card, maybe about that big. And then we go to kind of his board table. He had a big board table in his office, and it's him and his wife and his 4 kids. They're maybe ages 18 to 30, something like that. Yeah. So we're sitting around the table. Interestingly enough, he started the meeting with a prayer, which was neat. So we start the meeting, and he's kind of a quiet, introspective guy. Actually, a lawyer and a CPA.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Dangerous combination.
Yeah. So he starts the meeting and he says, hey, Chris has done the estate plan. He's going to tell you what it is. But he's insisted that I tell you what the wealth is.
I don't want to do this, but
yes. So he says, I'm going to tell you a story that you've never heard before. He said, when I was in first grade, my best friend came up to me at lunch and he asked me for my banana. And I said to him, well, I ate my banana. And he said, well, can I have your banana peel? And I said to him, sure. Why do you want my banana peel? And he said, because my daddy lost his job. And we don't have any food to eat. And so when I was in first grade, I decided at that moment what I wanted to be when I grew up. It wasn't a professional athlete. It wasn't the president of the United States. It was somebody who gave other people jobs. What this wealth is for is jobs and creating jobs. Well, there was not a dry eye at the table.
Yeah.
And then he pulled out that index card and he said, so when I walk in the office every day, my assistant hands me a card, this card. On that card is one number. It is not our stock price. It's a publicly traded company. It's not our market capitalization, and it is most certainly not our net worth. It's the number of jobs we give. That is the purpose of our wealth. No one knew that.
Right.
No one knew he had been given that card. No one knew that was the purpose. In Brady, it was a fundamental shift in that family. Look, the estate plan, the trust, the partnerships, all those were fine. Nothing changed with those based on that meeting. But what did change was that family now knew the purpose of that wealth. Now look, it doesn't mean that needs to be your purpose of your wealth, but it was for him and his family. So now when the kids walk into the company, all of them are involved either now working through the company or with their foundation.
Yeah.
Everyone gets a card that has that number on it, right? All of the kids do. Now the foundation shifted. So now what does the foundation do? It focuses on job training and job retraining. What do they celebrate in the company? When somebody else is hired, that's the purpose. So this family that was initially focused when he hired me on, what do we do about this 40% estate tax, right? Now what they're focused on is, no. The purpose of this wealth, what it's for is jobs, creating jobs. And I'll never forget what he said to me. And I said, why? And he looks at me and he says, Chris, every one of those people with a job, they feed their families, give back to their communities, their churches, their temples. We want to be a part of that. Now look, that's their purpose. That's what's right for their family. That card, that number is what matters to them. The question for the families who are listening to this is, great, what's your wealth for?
Right.
What's the purpose of it?
Right. And have you captured that and communicated that to your kids? Because I can imagine those 4 kids at different ages all might have viewed their dad differently. He may have been working a bunch. He may have been building this company and not around as much. He may have had, and without capturing that and without communicating that with your persistence, what would they have thought, or how long would that have gone? And would the grandkids ever have known it? Right. And so it seems like that moment, which started with that banana peel, it was just pivotal for that family to get it to that point, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know this because we work together. the most rewarding part of this career, honestly, it's not figuring out ways to avoid estate taxes or whether the portfolio is up 6% or 8%. Because the truth is, none of those things are going to matter in avoiding the 90% shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves.
Yeah.
Can you answer? The simple question, what is the wealth for?
Right.
What's the purpose of it? And then can you connect that purpose of it with your wealth? And can you actually answer the questions of like, wait, what are we doing with this?
Right.
This is where, wealth for comes in, right? This is where we've said, well, gosh, we need to figure out a way to help these families figure out what their wealth's for. So maybe let's make it multiple choice. Right.
Yep.
Here's a deck of cards.
Yeah. Discover. And the discovery can be hard, especially between spouses, between families. But once you have it and you're encouraged to communicate it, I think there's a great result. And it's the perfect transition to our second story, which is about capturing that and being able to communicate it. And not only the details and what it took to be successful in the stories and the struggles, but capturing that in the second story, which we call the letter.
Yeah.
So let's jump into that.
So again, super interesting family, quite literally led the American dream, grew up on a dirt floor in the Midwest, rose to become another billionaire family. And we were blessed and fortunate the opportunity to work with them. The patriarch of the family was diagnosed, unfortunately, with a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And told his son, hey, after I die, I want you to go to my desk in my office, open up the center drawer, pull it out. There'll be a letter there for it. Father dies. Son goes to the desk, pulls open the drawer, pulls out the letter, opens it up. The letter says, son, if you're reading this, I've died. Don't feel sorry for me. I've quite literally led the American dream. But there's some things I'd like you never to forget. And on that was a list in that letter. The first one was people. Because if you ever asked him what made him successful, how did he rise from growing up on a dirt floor on a farm in the middle of the country to becoming a billionaire, he would always say, people. You surround yourself with the best people. It was things like hire for character, train for skill. It was things like you can't win a horse race yelling whoa, right? It was things like get the right people on the bus, then find the right seat for them. It was things like nothing will work unless you do. Well, when the son read this, of course, it brought tears to his eyes. But what he realized was this was his father's values. It became the most prized possession the son had. Not the boat, not the homes, not the plane. It was that. So much so that he had it printed off and he handed it out at his father's celebration of life. So that not just he had this, all the people who went to that celebration of life had his father's values. He literally had it printed, like painted on a wall in their office. And what he did with that letter, Brady, was he captured, he wrote down, he memorialized, and he made permanent those values. That's what he did. And it was all in that letter.
For generations, right? Yeah. And I think that's awesome. It reminds me of that famous poem by Linda Ellis, The Dash, where it's capturing and understanding that we have this opportunity from the moment we're born to the moment we pass, which we never know will come up, to really have an impact in our lives. And to be able to capture that at the end is one thing, but also the ability that we can do it while we're alive.
Yeah, it's an interesting story also with The Dash. So The Dash, that incredibly beautiful Linda Ellis poem, talks about, on your tombstone, there's the date that you were born, the year that you were born and the year that you died. But it's the dash between those years that makes all the difference. And so I had a client of mine who called me up one morning to talk about his estate plan. And I said to him, hey, how are you? And he said, well, bit of a rough morning. Went to a funeral. But they read the most incredible poem at this funeral. I said, yeah, what is it? He says, it's The Dash by Linda Ellis. And he read it to me. And it talked about the significance of what you do with that dash. It's the dash between those years that makes the difference. And what was interesting is we talked about his dash, what he's doing with it. And every conversation I would have with him from that point forward, rather than we call up or when we meet saying, how are you? He would always say to me, and I would always say to him, how's your dash?
How nice.
And then when we had family meetings, that's what we would talk about. The first topic on the agenda for the meetings, he has 8 kids. With his 8 kids, it would say literally the dash. And we would go around the room and we talk about how are you spending your dash? And an incredibly moving story. I couldn't have felt more fortunate. Eventually he passed, and his son calls me up and he says, hey, my dad, when he was in the hospital, on his deathbed, asked if you would speak at his celebration of life, if you would read the dash, and if you would talk about his dash. So I had the incredible honor of doing that for this man who, again, led the American dream. And what it taught me, was, see, he was saying the purpose of this wealth, his value, is looking at how you spend that dash. What impact are you having? What people are you helping? What difference are you making? And going around the room in the family meeting, talking about the dash, which we still do after his death. Look, the trusts are fine. The partnership's fine. The tax saving was fine. That isn't actually what made the difference. What made the difference with him was that Linda Ellis poem, The Dash, and how it becomes part of those family meetings. It is now what his children, his grandchildren, and even his great-grandchildren talk about is that dash. So honestly, Brady, whether it is, hey, the purpose of my wealth is jobs because of this banana peel that I gave somebody in first grade, whether it is, hey, look, here are the values that we've memorialized for generations, or whether it is, hey, we're going to talk about how we spend our dash, not, whether we should renovate the bathroom, not whether we should buy a 4th home. It's that. Those are the things that make an enormous difference with families. And if you want to talk about how to avoid being in that 90%, which is a daunting task, right?
There you go.
That's how you do it.
And I think you can overthink the family meeting, right? I mean, this family meeting is sit around the table and tell a story and show them an index card with a number, and it turned into a generational wealth transfer. You can't imagine. And similarly with the dash, I mean, there's a guide for a family meeting, and it's incredibly motivational. And you mentioned a word in there as you were describing that, which was impact. And I think the third and final story that I want you to share is one that we call the platform. And I love that one because the listeners can picture ourselves, whether we're at home raising kids, whether we're building a business, or whether you've sold a business and you're trying to make an impact in the community. This story about platform, I think everyone can see themselves in at where we're at in life, and it helps us maybe spend our dash. Let's finish with that one.
So this is another one of those things that you never planned. So I was asked to give a speech in Texas. The speech was going to be Monday morning at 8 a.m. They said, hey, Chris, please fly in the night before, so in case flights are delayed Monday morning. I said, great. They said, hey, we have a cocktail party at 6, dinner at 7. I said, great. So I show up at the cocktail party at 6. They're like, Chris, we are so happy that you were here. And I said, well, happy to be here. Like, no, you are a big baseball fan. I'm like, St. Louis Cardinals, 11-time world champions, And he said, no, Clayton Kershaw, the pitcher for the Dodgers, and his wife Ellen are here. This was way back in 2011. So he's like 23 years old, as is his wife Ellen. I'm like, well, it's great that he's here. It's like, well, they want to talk about this orphanage they're building in Zambia to kids who lost their mom and dad to HIV. I said, well, that's terrific. Like, well, it's not. And here's why. They don't do public speaking. They will only be interviewed. Their agent is coming tonight to interview them up on stage. And we just got word that their agent literally fell and is in the hospital. So we need someone to interview Clayton and Ellen Kershaw.
It's like going to the bullpen, calling you in.
That's right. And so they said, would you do it? And I said, well, when? And they said, well, now. I'm like, okay. So I get up on stage and, I'm talking to Clayton and Ellen. And I said to Clayton, hey, Clayton, you just won the pitching triple crown. So you led the league in wins, ERAs, and strikeouts. You're about to win the Cy Young Award. What does it feel like
Right.
at 23 years old to be the best pitcher on the planet? And he laughs. And he says to me, that's so funny. You think of me as a pitcher. You think I throw up all fast. I make a ball move. I strike people out. He said, Chris, those things, pitching awards, like the pitching Triple Crown, the Cy Young Award, they won't last. Someone's going to win the Cy Young Award next year.
Yeah.
Someone will win the pitching Triple Crown again sometime. They won't last. He said, what will last is that orphanage that we're building in Zambia, to kids who lost their mom and dad to HIV. He said, so you think of me as a pitcher? Chris, pitching is just my platform.
There you go.
It's only my platform to make a difference, to touch lives, to have an impact. That's it. And then he turns, and in a moment that I certainly will never forget, he looked at me and he said, so Chris, pitching is my platform. What's yours?
Yeah.
And he looked at everyone in the audience and he said, same question. Pitching's my platform. What's yours? What's your platform to touch lives, to make a difference, to have an impact? And Brady, as I sit here and tell you right now, look, sure, I know how to plan estates and reduce and minimize estate taxes. We know how to manage portfolios. We know how to reduce, minimize income taxes. We know how to do all that. Brady, that is just our platform.
Right.
That's it. The challenge, the battle, the fight that families have, can they avoid going shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves?
Right.
Can they pass on the values? Can they explain a purpose? Our platform ought to be no more complicated than helping families do that. Can we help them? And that is a platform that I think is worth getting up and fighting for. It is not enough. It is not enough to simply do the planning. But he taught me something that I'll never forget. And it made an impact on me. And that is all we have here, whether it's in this job or our listeners, this is a platform. This is the platform we were given. What platform were you given? Have you communicated that with your family? Have you told them, that's it, that's what this is? This is our platform.
Yep. And he affected you, you affected me, and we get to affect the listeners today. That's what this show is all about, how we can connect wealth and purpose. And so, Chris, thank you so much for sharing these experiences with us today. For those of you that are listening for the first time, you can follow us on Apple, Spotify. If you prefer to watch this episode and share it with friends, you can do so on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@TFO Wealth. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you all next time on the Wealth and Purpose Podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Wealth and Purpose Podcast. If today's conversation further helped you connect your wealth and purpose, please follow our show on your favorite podcasting platform. More importantly, help us help more families by sharing today's episode with someone you know.